The medical tent stood silent in the Afghan desert, its white canvas walls flapping gently in the morning breeze. Dr. Sarah Chen had been preparing for the most important surgery of her deployment when the order came through the radio at 600 hours. Operation canceled. All medical personnel to stand down immediately. She stared at the surgical instruments laid out perfectly on the sterile table, each one positioned with precision for the complex heart surgery that would have saved Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez's life. The young soldier lay unconscious on the operating table, his vital signs growing weaker by the hour. A piece of shrapnel had lodged dangerously close to his heart during yesterday's firefight, and without immediate surgery he wouldn't survive another day. "Doc, we have to pack it up," called Sergeant Williams from the entrance of the tent. His usually confident voice carried an edge of uncertainty. "Orders from command. We're pulling out in 30 minutes. Sarah's hands trembled as she began covering the surgical tools. 3 years of medical training in war zones had taught her to follow orders without question, but this felt different. This felt wrong. Rodriguez was barely 22 years old, with a wife and newborn baby waiting for him back in Texas. His wedding photo was tucked into his uniform pocket, creased from being looked at too many times. The radio crackled again with updates about the evacuation. Intelligence had spotted enemy movement in the surrounding hills. A large Taliban force was reportedly moving toward their position, and staying would mean certain death for everyone in the medical unit. The decision was tactical, logical, and absolutely necessary for the survival of the remaining 43 soldiers in their convoy. But logic felt meaningless when looking at Rodriguez's pale face. His breathing was shallow, each rise and fall of his chest a reminder that time was running out. The nearest proper medical facility was 8 hours away by helicopter, assuming they could even get air support in this weather. The morning sandstorm had grounded most aircraft, leaving them stranded in hostile territory. Corpsman Davis approached the table where Rodriguez lay. His young face was marked by the same helpless expression that Sarah felt burning in her chest. "Ma'am, what about the patient? We can't move him in this condition. The journey alone could kill him." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The military had taught her many things, but choosing between saving one life and risking dozens was not a lesson covered in medical school. She had sworn an oath to do no harm, to preserve life above all else. Yet here she stood, forced to abandon a patient who depended entirely on her skills and dedication. The sound of vehicles starting up outside filled the air. Engines roared to life as the convoy prepared for immediate departure. Through the tent opening, she could see soldiers loading equipment and supplies with practiced efficiency. Everyone knew the drill. When the enemy was approaching, you moved fast or you died. There was no middle ground in this desert. 5 more minutes, Sarah whispered to herself, though she knew 5 minutes wouldn't change anything. The surgery she needed to perform would take at least 3 hours under the best conditions. Even if she started right now, they would all be sitting targets when the enemy arrived. Rodriguez's wedding ring caught the light from the overhead lamp. Sarah reached over and gently adjusted his IV line, checking his pulse one more time, steady but weak. He was fighting to stay alive, just as she was fighting to find a solution that didn't exist. The radio in the corner continued its steady stream of tactical updates. Enemy positions, weather reports, evacuation routes. Everything was proceeding according to military protocol. Everything except the crushing weight of leaving behind someone who could be saved. Outside, Sergeant Williams called out the 5-minute warning. Soon, this tent would be empty, and Rodriguez would be alone in the desert. The thought made Sarah's stomach turn. She had lost patients before during her deployment, but never like this. Never because she had to walk away when she could have helped. She looked around the medical tent one final time, memorizing every detail. The smell of antiseptic mixed with desert dust, the soft hum of portable equipment, the way the morning light filtered through the canvas walls creating patterns on the floor. This place had been her operating room, her sanctuary, her chance to save lives in the middle of chaos. Now it would become Rodriguez's tomb unless a miracle happened in the next few minutes. Sarah picked up her medical bag and moved toward the tent entrance, each step feeling like a betrayal of everything she believed in. Behind her, the steady beep of Rodriguez's heart monitor continued its lonely rhythm, counting down the moments until silence would take over completely. The convoy moved through the desert like a mechanical snake, each vehicle trailing dust clouds that hung in the still morning air. Sarah sat in the back of the medical transport, staring out at the empty landscape rolling past the windows. Every bump in the rough terrain seemed to echo the heartbeat she had left behind in that white tent. Sergeant Williams drove in focused silence, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon for signs of enemy movement. The radio chattered with position reports from other vehicles in the convoy. Everyone was maintaining proper distance, following evacuation protocols that had been drilled into them countless times during training. "Doc, you okay back there?" Williams asked without taking his eyes off the road. He had served with Sarah for 8 months and knew her well enough to recognize the signs of internal struggle. She hadn't spoken a word since leaving the medical camp 30 minutes ago. Sarah nodded but didn't trust herself to speak. The image of Rodriguez's unconscious face kept flashing through her mind. She wondered if he was awake now, confused and alone in that abandoned tent. Did he understand what was happening? Could he hear the engines of the convoy growing fainter in the distance? The radio suddenly burst to life with an urgent transmission. "Convoy Alpha, this is Eye in the Sky. We have movement on your 6. Multiple vehicles approaching your previous position. Distance approximately 12 kilometers and closing." Williams pressed the radio button. "Copy, Eye in the Sky. Any visual on friendlies in that area?" "Negative, Convoy Alpha. Area should be clear of all friendly forces." Sarah's blood ran cold. The enemy was heading straight for the abandoned medical camp. Straight for Rodriguez. She grabbed the radio from Williams before he could stop her. "Eye in the Sky, this is Dr. Chen. We have a patient left behind at the medical station. Repeat, we have a wounded soldier at the previous location." Static filled the radio for several long seconds. Then a different voice came through, deeper and more authoritative. "Dr. Chen, this is Command. Confirm your previous transmission. Did you say wounded soldier?" "Affirmative, Command. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, 22 years old. Critical condition with shrapnel near his heart. He was unconscious when we evacuated and couldn't be moved safely." More silence. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat in her ears as they waited for Command's response. Around her, the other medics in the transport had gone completely quiet, understanding the gravity of what she had just revealed. "Dr. Chen, that information was not included in the evacuation report. Explain." Williams reached for the radio, but Sarah held it firmly. This was her responsibility, her decision to speak up. "Command, the patient required immediate surgery that couldn't be completed before evacuation order. I made the clinical decision that transport would be fatal given his condition." "Understood. Dr. Chen, stand by." The convoy continued moving through the desert, but Sarah noticed their speed had decreased slightly. Through the windshield, she could see the lead vehicle's brake lights flickering, as if the driver was uncertain about maintaining their pace. Something was happening at command level, and everyone could feel the tension building. Corpsman Davis leaned forward from his seat. "Doc, did you see any identification on Rodriguez when you were treating him? Dog tags, unit patches, anything specific?" Sarah closed her eyes, trying to remember every detail from the rushed examination yesterday evening. He had a Special Forces patch. Green Beret. And his dog tags had an unusual designation I didn't recognize. Something about Shadow Unit. Davis and Williams exchanged a quick look that didn't go unnoticed. Williams cleared his throat carefully. "Doc, Special Forces guys sometimes have classifications that are above our security level. If Rodriguez is part of a classified unit..." The radio crackled again before he could finish. "Convoy Alpha, this is Command. Halt your current position and wait for further orders. Do not proceed to extraction point until advised." Williams immediately began slowing the vehicle, and Sarah could see the other trucks in the convoy doing the same. They pulled off the rough road into a defensive circle formation, engines still running but no longer moving forward. "What's happening?" Sarah asked. But Williams was already busy coordinating with the other vehicle commanders over the radio. The standard military efficiency that had marked their evacuation was being replaced by something else. Uncertainty, confusion, and underneath it all, a sense of urgency that seemed to be growing by the minute. Sarah looked back toward the direction they had come from. Even though the medical camp was now far beyond the horizon, somewhere out there Rodriguez was either fighting for his life alone or had already lost that fight. And somewhere else an enemy force was moving toward him with unknown intentions. She had been a military doctor long enough to understand that some decisions were made at levels far above her pay grade. But she had also been a doctor long enough to know that every life mattered. regardless of military rank, unit designation, or classification level. The radio remained ominously quiet as they waited in the desert heat for orders that might determine whether her split-second decision to speak up would save Rodriguez's life or doom them all. 20 minutes passed in the desert heat before the radio finally came alive again. The voice that emerged was different from any Sarah had heard during her deployment, calm, controlled, and carrying an authority that made everyone in the convoy sit up straighter. Convoy Alpha. This is Colonel Morrison, Special Operations Command. Dr. Chen, I need you on this channel immediately. Sarah took the radio with trembling hands. Speaking directly to a colonel was far outside her normal chain of command. This is Dr. Chen, Colonel. I'm here. Doctor, I need precise details about Lieutenant Rodriguez's condition and your assessment of his survival timeframe. This is classified information that goes no further than this conversation. Sarah took a deep breath and switched into her professional medical mode. Colonel, the patient has a metallic fragment approximately 2 centimeters from his left ventricle. Without surgical removal, he has maybe 6 hours before cardiac tamponade becomes fatal. The fragment is causing progressive bleeding into the pericardial space. Understood. And your assessment of his ability to withstand transport? Negative, Colonel. Any significant movement or vibration could shift the fragment directly into his heart muscle. He would die within minutes. The radio went quiet again. Sarah could hear muffled conversations in the background, multiple voices discussing options she couldn't quite make out. Around her, the entire convoy sat in the blazing sun, engines running, everyone waiting for a decision that would determine their next move. Williams had been monitoring the tactical frequency on a separate radio. He leaned over to Sarah and spoke quietly. Doc, that enemy force is now 8 kilometers from the medical camp, moving fast and armed heavy. Whatever command decides, they need to decide it now. The colonel's voice returned. Dr. Chen, I'm going to share information with you that is strictly classified. Lieutenant Rodriguez is not just any soldier. He's part of Shadow Unit 5, one of our most sensitive special operations teams. The intelligence he carries cannot fall into enemy hands under any circumstances. Sarah's heart sank as she began to understand the full complexity of their situation. This wasn't just about saving one wounded soldier anymore. This was about national security, classified operations, and military secrets that were apparently worth more than a single life. Colonel, are you ordering me to? She couldn't finish the sentence. I'm not ordering you to do anything, Doctor. I'm giving you information so you can make an informed decision. We have assets in the area, but deploying them would expose capabilities we've kept secret for years. The question is whether one life is worth compromising operations that protect thousands of others. Williams grabbed Sarah's arm gently. Doc, look at me. Whatever you're thinking, remember that we're soldiers too. We knew the risks when we signed up. Rodriguez knew them too. But Sarah was thinking about something else entirely. Colonel, what if Rodriguez could be moved safely? What if there was a way to extract him without compromising your other operations? Explain what you mean, Doctor. Sarah closed her eyes and ran through the possibilities in her mind. The fragment is stable right now because he's lying perfectly still. If we could maintain that exact position during transport, keep him completely immobilized, there might be a chance. It would require precise coordination and specialized equipment. Dr. Chen, our intelligence shows the enemy force will reach the medical camp in less than 4 hours. Even if we could organize such an extraction, there's no way to do it without revealing the existence of assets we've kept hidden. The weight of the decision was crushing. Sarah looked around at the faces of her fellow medics, all of whom were listening intently to every word. These people had become her family over the past year. They trusted her medical judgment, followed her lead in crisis situations, and looked to her for guidance when things got difficult. Now she was being asked to weigh one life against military secrecy, to choose between her oath as a doctor and her duty as a soldier. The contradiction felt impossible to resolve. Corpsman Davis spoke up quietly. Ma'am, if Rodriguez is really carrying sensitive intelligence, wouldn't the enemy torture him for information if they capture him alive? Maybe leaving him there isn't just abandoning him. Maybe it's condemning him to something worse than death. The radio crackled with another transmission from Eye in the Sky. All stations, enemy convoy has increased speed. Now estimated arrival at medical camp in 3 hours, 15 minutes. Weather conditions improving. Possible air support available within the hour. Colonel Morrison's voice cut through immediately. Dr. Chen, I need your decision now. We either move forward with extraction, or we authorize alternative measures to ensure intelligence security. There's no middle ground here. Sarah understood what alternative measures meant. Someone would be sent to ensure that Rodriguez and any sensitive information died before the enemy arrived. The thought made her feel sick, but she also understood the military logic behind it. She looked out at the desert landscape, empty and hostile in every direction. Somewhere out there, a young husband and father was lying unconscious, unaware that his life had become part of a much larger equation. His wedding photo was still in his uniform pocket, a reminder of everything he had to live for. "Colonel," Sarah said finally, "I need 5 minutes to think." "You have 3 minutes, Doctor. After that, the decision gets made for you." Sarah stared at the radio in her hands, feeling the weight of 3 minutes counting down like a bomb timer. Around her, the convoy waited in absolute silence. Even the desert wind seemed to have stopped, as if nature itself was holding its breath for her decision. "Williams," she said quietly, "in your experience, what would Rodriguez want if he could make this choice himself?" The sergeant thought for a moment, his weathered face serious. "Doc, I've served with Special Forces guys before. They understand the mission comes first. Rodriguez knew what he signed up for when he joined Shadow Unit 5, but..." He paused. "But he's also got that baby girl at home. His wife sent him a photo last week. First steps." Sarah closed her eyes and tried to push away the image of Rodriguez's family receiving a folded flag instead of their husband and father. But she also thought about all the other families who might suffer if sensitive military operations were compromised. The radio crackled. "Dr. Chen, 2 minutes remaining." Suddenly, Corpsman Davis spoke up with urgency in his voice. "Doc, wait. What if we're thinking about this all wrong? You said the fragment is stable as long as Rodriguez doesn't move, right? What if Rodriguez isn't unconscious anymore? What if he's awake and could make this decision himself?" Sarah's heart jumped. In all the discussion about military protocol and classified operations, she had forgotten the most basic medical possibility. Patients with Rodriguez's type of injury sometimes regained consciousness as swelling reduced. He might be awake right now, alone in that medical tent, fully aware of his situation. She grabbed the radio. "Colonel Morrison, this is Dr. Chen. Is there any way to establish communication with the medical camp? The patient may have regained consciousness." "Negative, Doctor. All communication equipment was removed during evacuation. Standard protocol." But Williams was already reaching for a different radio, one tuned to emergency frequencies. "Doc, Rodriguez's Special Forces training would include survival communication procedures. If he's awake, he might be trying to reach out on emergency channels." Williams began scanning through military emergency frequencies, listening for any signs of transmission. Static filled the radio for several seconds, then a weak voice broke through the interference. "This is Shadow Unit 5 to any friendly forces. I am wounded and immobile at coordinates." The transmission was faint but clear enough to understand. Sarah's hands were shaking as she took the radio. "Rodriguez, this is Dr. Chen. Can you hear me clearly?" "Doc? Thank God, I woke up about 20 minutes ago. Figured out what happened when I heard the enemy vehicles in the distance. I'm not going anywhere with this metal in my chest, am I?" The directness of his question caught Sarah off guard. "Marcus, your condition is critical. Any movement could be fatal. But there might be ways to extract you safely if we can coordinate properly." "Doc, I can hear enemy engines getting closer. Maybe 2 hours out, possibly less, and I can feel this thing in my chest shifting when I breathe. I don't think I have 2 hours." Colonel Morrison's voice cut in on the channel. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, this is Colonel Morrison, Special Operations Command. I need to inform you that extraction would require exposing classified assets. Do you understand the implications?" There was a long pause before Rodriguez responded, his voice weak but determined. "Colonel, I understand perfectly. I also understand that my wife Maria is expecting me to come home to meet my daughter. She's 4 months old now. Her name is Elena." Sarah felt tears starting in her eyes. The personal details made everything more real, more human than the abstract military calculations they had been discussing. Rodriguez continued, "Colonel, I've been thinking while lying here. The intelligence I'm carrying, it's about terrorist supply routes through this region, right? Information that could save civilian lives if it gets to the right people?" "That's correct, Lieutenant. Then here's what I propose. I'm going to transmit everything I know right now, over this open channel. Every detail, every contact, every location. The information gets out regardless of what happens to me. After that, you can make whatever decision you think is best." Sarah was amazed by Rodriguez's clarity despite his critical condition. The young soldier had found a way to separate his personal survival from his military mission, ensuring that important intelligence would survive, even if he didn't. Rodriguez, wait, Sarah interrupted. If you transmit that information over open channels, the enemy will intercept it too. They'll know their operations have been compromised. Doc, that might actually be better. If they know we're onto them, they'll have to shut down their current operations and start over. That buys time for our people to set up countermeasures. Sometimes the best way to win is to make the other side think they've lost. Colonel Morrison was quiet for several seconds before responding. Lieutenant, that's tactically sound reasoning. But it still doesn't solve the immediate problem of your extraction. Rodriguez's voice was getting weaker, but his determination remained strong. Colonel, I've got an idea about that too. But first, let me get this intelligence transmitted. Dr. Chen, how long do you think I have before this fragment moves into my heart? Sarah looked at her watch and calculated based on his voice strength and breathing patterns. Maybe 90 minutes, Marcus. Possibly less if you exert yourself. Then we better work fast. Colonel, are you ready to receive intelligence transmission? As Rodriguez began sharing critical military information over the radio, Sarah realized that this young soldier had just transformed their impossible situation into something manageable. He had found a way to fulfill his military duty while still fighting for his own survival. But the clock was still ticking, and enemy forces were still approaching. Whatever plan Rodriguez had in mind, it needed to work quickly. Rodriguez's voice grew more strained as he transmitted the sensitive intelligence over the radio, but his information was incredibly detailed and precise. Sarah listened in amazement as he described terrorist supply routes, weapon caches, and planned attacks with the kind of accuracy that could only come from months of dangerous undercover work. Colonel, that concludes the intelligence package, Rodriguez said, his breathing noticeably more labored than before. Everything I gathered during the past 6 months is now in your hands. The mission is complete regardless of what happens next. Colonel Morrison's response carried a note of genuine respect. Outstanding work, Lieutenant. That intelligence is going to save lives. Now, what's this plan you mentioned for extraction? Rodriguez paused, and Sarah could hear him taking careful, shallow breaths. Colonel, I've been thinking about the tactical situation. The enemy is coming here expecting to find an abandoned medical camp. What if they found something different instead? Explain, Lieutenant. Sir, what if they arrived to find the medical camp fully operational, with a full surgical team performing an emergency operation? What if Dr. Chen and her team were here, working to save my life, completely focused on their medical mission? Sarah's heart stopped. Marcus, are you suggesting we return to the medical camp? With enemy forces approaching? Doc, hear me out. The enemy isn't coming here to fight a medical team. They're coming to secure an abandoned position and look for intelligence. If they find doctors performing surgery, their first instinct won't be to open fire. Medical personnel are protected under international law even during combat operations. Williams was shaking his head. Rodriguez, that's incredibly risky. There's no guarantee enemy forces will respect medical neutrality. Sergeant, you're right. It's risky, but it's also unexpected. And sometimes the most dangerous plan is actually the safest, because nobody sees it coming. Colonel Morrison's voice cut through the debate. Lieutenant Rodriguez, even if we accepted the tactical reasoning behind your plan, we don't have time to get Dr. Chen back to your position. The enemy will arrive before any extraction could be organized. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, then spoke with renewed determination. Colonel, what if I told you the extraction was already in progress? What if Shadow Unit 5 never left the area? The radio went dead silent. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine despite the desert heat. Williams was staring at the radio with an expression of complete confusion. Rodriguez, Colonel Morrison said carefully, Shadow Unit 5 was reported as evacuated with the main convoy. Confirm your current status. Sir, Shadow Unit 5 has been maintaining overwatch of this medical camp since the evacuation order was given. We never left. We've been waiting for the right moment to extract our wounded team member. Sarah's mind was racing. Marcus, are you saying there are other Special Forces soldiers at the medical camp right now? Negative, Doc. I'm saying there are other Shadow Unit 5 operatives positioned around the camp, and they've been there the whole time. The evacuation order only applied to regular military personnel. Special operations units have different protocols. Williams grabbed Sarah's arm. Doc, if there's already a Special Forces team at the medical camp, Why didn't they extract Rodriguez earlier? Rodriguez answered before Sarah could ask the question herself. Because my condition was too critical for field extraction, and we were waiting for the right tactical opportunity. The approaching enemy force actually creates the perfect cover for extraction. Colonel Morrison's voice carried a note of understanding. Lieutenant, are you telling me that your team has been using the medical emergency as cover for a larger operation? Sir, I'm telling you that Shadow Unit 5 specializes in turning desperate situations into tactical advantages. The enemy approaching this position believes they're about to secure valuable intelligence and an abandoned facility. Instead, they're about to walk into a carefully prepared scenario. Sarah was beginning to understand the complexity of what had been happening around her without her knowledge. Marcus, how long has your team been planning this? Doc, we've been planning contingencies since the moment I was wounded. Special Forces doesn't leave people behind, but we also don't waste opportunities. The intelligence I just transmitted was important, but the operation to neutralize the terrorist cell approaching this position is even more critical. The radio crackled with a new voice, deeper and more authoritative than Rodriguez. Colonel Morrison, this is Shadow Unit 5 Actual. We are in position and ready to proceed with medical extraction and tactical operation. Request permission to bring Dr. Chen back to complete the surgery. Sarah felt like the world had just shifted around her. Everything she thought she understood about their situation had been incomplete. The abandoned medical camp wasn't abandoned. The impossible extraction wasn't impossible. The choice between saving Rodriguez and protecting military secrets had never been the real choice at all. Shadow Unit 5. Actual, Colonel Morrison responded. Explain your tactical assessment, sir. We have 12 enemy vehicles approaching our position. They're expecting to find intelligence and supplies. Instead, they'll find a fully operational medical facility with Dr. Chen performing life-saving surgery on one of their captured targets. While they're deciding how to handle that unexpected situation, we'll have tactical advantage from concealed positions. Williams looked at Sarah with amazement. Doc, I think we're about to become part of a Special Forces operation whether we want to or not. Rodriguez's weak voice came through the radio one more time. Dr. Chen, I know this isn't what you signed up for when you became a military doctor, but right now I need you to be both a doctor and a soldier. Are you willing to come back and finish what we started? Sarah looked around at her medical team, all of whom were staring at her with expressions that mixed fear, excitement, and determination. Outside their vehicle, the desert stretched endlessly in all directions, offering no easy answers or safe choices. Marcus, she said finally, how long do we have to get back there and set up for surgery? Doc, if we move now, you'll have exactly enough time to scrub in before the enemy arrives. After that, it gets interesting. The convoy turned around with military precision, racing back through the desert toward the medical camp they had abandoned just hours earlier. Sarah's medical transport led the formation now, with Williams pushing their vehicle to maximum speed across the rough terrain. Every minute counted. Dr. Chen, came the voice of Shadow Unit 5 Actual over the radio. We have eyes on your approach. Enemy forces are now 30 minutes out. You'll have approximately 15 minutes to establish surgical procedures before contact. Sarah was reviewing Rodriguez's medical files and preparing her surgical plan. The metallic fragment had to be removed with absolutely no room for error. One wrong move would kill him instantly, but leaving it in place would kill him slowly. Neither option was acceptable. Shadow Unit 5, she radioed back. I'll need complete silence during the critical phase of surgery. Any loud noises or sudden movements could shift the fragment. Understood, Doc. We'll handle external security. You focus on keeping our boy alive. As they approached the medical camp, Sarah could see that it looked exactly as they had left it. The white tent stood alone in the desert, appearing completely abandoned to anyone watching from a distance. But she now knew that trained Special Forces operators were positioned in concealed locations around the perimeter. The convoy pulled up to the medical tent, and Sarah's team immediately began setting up surgical equipment with practiced efficiency. Rodriguez was still conscious but visibly weaker than before. His face was pale and his breathing was shallow. Hey, Doc, he said with a weak smile as she entered the tent. Thanks for coming back. I wasn't sure you would. Marcus, I'm a doctor first and a soldier second. My job is to save lives regardless of the circumstances. She began scrubbing for surgery while her team prepared the operating area. Besides, you made it impossible for me to say no. That was the plan. Rodriguez admitted. Special forces training includes psychological operations. Sometimes you have to manipulate the situation to get the outcome everyone needs. Sarah paused in her preparations. Are you telling me you planned this entire scenario? The intelligence transmission, the extraction plan, everything? Rodriguez's expression grew serious. Doc, I planned contingencies, but the real plan was always to trust that good people would make the right choices when it mattered. You proved that trust was justified. Outside the tent, Sarah could hear the distant rumble of approaching vehicles. The enemy convoy was closer than expected. Through the tent opening, she caught a glimpse of Shadow Unit 5 operators moving into final positions. Their movements so smooth and silent they seemed like shadows. Rodriguez, I need you to stay absolutely still during this surgery. The fragment is in a critical position and any movement could be fatal. Doc, I've been lying perfectly still for hours. I'm not about to move now. Sarah made the first incision with steady hands despite the knowledge that enemy forces were approaching their position. The surgery was technically complex under the best circumstances, but performing it while hostile forces surrounded the medical tent required a level of concentration she had never needed before. Dr. Chen, came a whispered voice over the radio. Enemy vehicles are 2 minutes out. Maintain normal surgical procedures regardless of what happens outside. Through her surgical magnification, Sarah could see the metallic fragment clearly now. It was larger than she had expected, and positioned even more dangerously than her initial assessment had indicated. Removing it would require absolute precision. The sound of vehicle engines grew louder, then stopped abruptly outside the medical tent. Sarah heard car doors slamming and voices speaking in a language she didn't recognize. Enemy soldiers were now just meters away from where she was performing surgery. Stay focused, Doc, Rodriguez whispered. Trust the plan. Sarah carefully positioned her surgical instruments around the fragment. This was the critical moment. One steady movement would free the metal from Rodriguez's heart tissue. Any hesitation or mistake would kill him. Outside, she heard footsteps approaching the tent entrance. Voices were getting louder, more aggressive. Someone was definitely coming to investigate the medical facility. Sarah made her move, carefully extracting the fragment in one smooth motion. Rodriguez's vital signs remained stable. The surgery was successful. At that exact moment, the radio crackled with a calm, professional voice. Shadow Unit 5, mission complete. The sounds outside the tent changed dramatically. Instead of aggressive foreign voices, Sarah now heard the coordinated movements of professional soldiers securing an area. Whatever Shadow Unit 5 had planned was happening exactly as intended. Rodriguez smiled weakly from the operating table. Doc, I told you it would get interesting. Colonel Morrison's voice came over the radio with obvious satisfaction. Dr. Chen, outstanding work. Lieutenant Rodriguez's surgery was successful, and Shadow Unit 5 has successfully neutralized the terrorist cell that was targeting this position. All enemy combatants are in custody. Sarah looked around the medical tent, finally understanding the full scope of what had just happened. The canceled operation had never really been canceled. It had been transformed into something much larger and more complex. Rodriguez, she said while closing his surgical incision, next time you need surgery, let's try to do it without the Special Forces operation happening simultaneously. Rodriguez laughed, then winced from the pain. Doc, where would be the fun in that? Outside the tent, she could see Shadow Unit 5 operators moving with quiet efficiency, coordinating with the arriving helicopters that would transport everyone to safety. The mission was indeed complete, but Sarah realized it had been successful in ways she was only beginning to understand. The radio crackled one final time with Colonel Morrison's voice. Shadow Unit 5. Dr. Chen and all medical personnel, outstanding work. This operation will be classified, but know that your actions today saved lives and prevented terrorist attacks that could have killed hundreds of civilians. Sarah looked down at Rodriguez, who was resting peacefully after successful surgery. His wedding photo was still in his uniform pocket, and soon he would be returning home to his wife and daughter. Sometimes the most important operations were the ones that appeared to be canceled.